Hey folks out there, hope you're doing well. It's Mark, back again with a vinyl update. Showed you a bunch of 45s I've picked up over the last few months. Well, now it's time to show you the LPs and 12-inch singles I've picked up over the last few months, dating back to maybe March up to now. Listened to them all, given them thorough attention, and now it's time to file them away. But before I do that, I wanted to share them with you. Again, hope you're all doing well, and yeah, this is going to be the usual mix of new wave, reggae, I don't know, just a whole hodgepodge of stuff. So we'll start off with stuff, and this is all in random order. I can't even remember anymore where I picked up all this stuff. It's all just been various sources over the last few months. So I did go into a store here recently called The Exchange. It's a chain of used, CDs, DVDs, video games. It's just like, one of those. And well, they dumped a bunch of German electronic 12-inch singles and albums in their $3 bin. And these things were in pristine shape. Didn't really know what any of them were, so I bought a few of them just because the covers looked kind of cool. So the first one I got was Ecologist, The Ecologist. See if you can read that. And it's called The Mechanics of Joy, Extreme Minimal Synth. Almost a little too minimal for me. It didn't really have much melody. But it was interesting nonetheless. This came out in 2013. Lars Leonard. Again, I'm not quite sure who he is, but it's an EP called No Comment. I really like the sleeve of this. And it's 6 variations on No Comment. Very atmospheric kind of synth music. Rhythmic, but then other parts of it were a little bit ambient. I liked it. Aphex Twin, that kind of thing. Then I know this label out of Germany called Tresor, I think is what it's called. It's been around for about 10 years, and you don't see the records much, but usually it's pretty cutting-edge dance music out of Berlin that you get on this label called Tresor. So I picked up this 12-inch by Sleep Archive. It's called Ronan Point. This came out in 2011. A more atmospheric electronic, but this definitely made for the dance floor. But lots of very melodic. Quite liked it a lot. Found a nice copy of XTC's English Settlement. I used to have this on cassette back in the 80s, but never owned the album. Always wanted to hold out for a UK double edition that was in good shape. And I did find it. It was in good condition and for a relatively good price. So English Settlement by XTC, one of the few albums I never had. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, the only XTC album I don't own is The Big Express. So that one's next on my list. Picked up finally Night Flights, got this online by the Walker Brothers. This is from 1978. Brilliant album, very Bowie-esque, more atmospheric kind of stuff. You can tell Scott Walker was heading in a more obtuse direction with this album, Night Flights. Great, great album. I really like Inner City, Kevin Saunderson and his Detroit techno sound. This is a 12-inch I found by them called Follow Your Heart. Had a bunch of different mixes, one by Frankie Knuckles. So, quite like that. More disco, early 80s disco from Lime. This is a 12-inch called Babe, We're Gonna Love Tonight. And just good, almost Italo disco, but it's not Italo disco. Just early 80s dance music. Very catchy. Liked it a lot. This is another 12-inch I found in that slew of German records. This is Jerry Reed, and it's a 12-inch, not Jerry Reed, the country singer. This is Jerry Reed. Like the cover. Really nice cover. Minimal synth, techno kind of stuff. So this was also in that bin of records I found from Germany. Found this too. Turns out this is actually worth a little bit of money. I looked it up on Discogs. I believe it's a German duo called the KVB. Kind of a psychedelic electronic duo. Think Suicide, and you're on the right wavelength. The KVB, and this is an EP of 5 remixes by them. 12-inch by Material. This is an act Bill Laswell, bassist Bill Laswell did early 1980s, and more of a disco dance kind of vibe. I'm the One and Don't Lose Control on the back. If any of you know Paid in Full by Eric B. and Rakim, there's a sample in there that goes, ow. I think it was taken from here. I recognized it. Don't Lose Control. If you know that song, YouTube this, and you might know the sample I'm talking about. The Hollow Men, band out of Leeds, post-punk group, not really a post-punk group, more of an indie band from the mid-1980s, early 1990s. This is, it turns out, their first 12-inch, Gold and Ivory, came out on their own Evensong label in 1987. Psychedelic indie pop from the late 1980s from Britain. Band I really liked a lot called the Milltown Brothers. This is Which Way Should I Jump? The A&M release. I have the indie 12-inch of this, which is a different mix. This had an extended version and 3 unreleased B-sides. Milltown Brothers. Jangly UK pop from the early 1980s. I liked them. Found another Rumor album. This is the band fronted by Brinsley Schwartz, I believe. I'm pretty sure. Do I see him on the credits? Don't see him on the credits. He may not be on this album, but he's on the other album I have by them. This is the band that backed Graham Parker in the late 70s, and just good power pop, almost pub rock a little bit. The Rumor. This is an album from 77 called Max. A guy named Clifford T. Ward found this real cheap. English songwriter Clifford T. Ward. The album's called Home Thoughts. Look up the track Wherewithal. If you like Paul McCartney, Beatlesque pop from the early 1970s, you'd like this guy. Clifford T. Ward. Here's a Italo 12-inch reissued by the wonderful Dark Entries label. It's by Some Bizarre, and the 12-inch is called Don't Be Afraid. Dance floor stomper. Not bad. Not great, but I need to give it a few more spins. Apparently it came out originally in 1983 and has now been reissued by Dark Entries. Here's one I found, Palm Skin Productions. This was on the Virgin Hut label. I picked it up because it was $1, and it was also on the Hut Virgin label, which had Smashing Pumpkins, The Auteurs, and Revolver in the early 1990s. So this 12-inch came out in 96 and is a lot like Massive Attack. Kind of that trip-hoppy kind of vibe. Eartha Kitt, Where Is My Man? Just good early 80s thumpa disco with Eartha Kitt. Here's a double album by Kaleidoscope, the late 60s band, the UK band Kaleidoscope, not the American band. Now, I have both of their albums, Tangerine Dream, which is a must. If you like Piper at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd, you will love this. Really, really good psychedelic pop. This is a collection of all of their singles, and it includes singles mixes and 3 non-LP singles that Kaleidoscope did. And then after the second album, they changed their name to Fairfield Parlor and issued quite a few singles under that name, and those are included on this as well. So, Kaleidoscope. This album's called Forget About Tomorrow. Zapp. Never did have an album by Zapp, so this is Zapp 2. If you like Funkadelic, Parliament, and Prince, this is definitely something you will dig. I already knew some of the tracks. There's a roller skating night that happens here in Cleveland it happens every week. I haven't been for a few months, but I recognized a couple of the songs. They play them at the roller rink. Whoever DJs there has a big Funkadelic itch he likes to scratch. Here's one by the Hollies, and it's called Hollies Sing Hollies. This is after Graham Nash left the band. I think it came out in 1970, and not bad. It's not as great as I thought it would be, but it's still pretty good. It's got about half of it I liked a lot. Really good harmonic pop from the Hollies. The Opposition, English post-punk band I've heard a lot about. This is good stuff. Trying to think of a good description. Not too unlike maybe The Sound, but not as dark as them. I don't know how really else to describe them. Just good mid-80s guitar pop from The Opposition. This is an album called Promises that came out on Virgin in 1984, and it's produced by Kenny Jones. I assume that is Kenny Jones of Small Faces and The Who. Never owned this mid-year album before, The Gift. I found it real cheap and in good shape, so I went ahead and picked it up. He's coming to Cleveland here soon as a solo act, and I'm really looking forward to catching him. I'm a huge Ultravox fan and really like mid-year a lot. 12-inch by The Truth. This one's called Confusion Hits Us Every Time. Modish pop band from the UK, early 1980s. They later had a hit around 1987 here in the US called Weapons of Love. This is an earlier one. Confusion Hits Us Every Time. Ocean Color Scene. This is before they went Britpop, before they got really big. And this was 1992 12-inch they released called Giving It All Away, when they had a little more of a psychedelic tinge to them. Basement 5, been wanting this one for a long time. Good early 80s, from 1980. Kind of disco punk, funk, reggae dub, if you're into kind of a mix of all of that. I believe one of the members of this band turned up in Big Audio Dynamite later on, and the whole thing's produced by Martin Hannett. More early 80s, or no, mid 80s, kind of thumpa disco from Off. He had a club hit with Electric Salsa, which is included on here. This is a 12-inch called Time Operator. Just good kind of disco, mid 1980s Italo disco. Amazulu. This one's called Excitable. Baby, you're so excitable. I remember this from MTV in the mid 1980s. Just a good kind of reggae-ish Caribbean sound from this UK act, Amazulu. They had another great song called Montego Bay. Remind me a little bit of the Bell Stars, a little bit. Here's another act on the awesome Dark Entries label. This is an album that I believe came out in 1981. Let's look here. It did. 1981. Compared to Early Human League, Cabaret Voltaire, Tuxedo Moon, and Yellow, the group is ZYX, and the LP is called Trust No Woman. And it's early 80s minimalist synth. Really, really liked it a lot. And this duo is from Austria. And I really liked that they were called ZYX, because if you look back at this off 12-inch I just showed you, it's on the ZYX label. And so I wondered if there was ever a connection. Who knows? Celibate Rifles, kind of a punkish band from Australia. This is a live album they did called Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Just snotty, loose garage rock with a heavy kind of punk vibe. If you like the Saints, you might like them. Horace Andy, one of my favorite reggae singers. This is a dub album that he did called In the Light Dub. Horace Andy, In the Light Dub. He also sang on records by Massive Attack. So check him out if you haven't already. Figures on a Beach, early 80s synth pop from Boston. And this is an EP called Swimming. Never seen it before. It was independently released on the Metro America label. Apparently when the band was still based in Detroit. So Figures on a Beach. Synth pop, mid-80s. 12-inch on the Sal Soul label. I love finding stuff on this label. And this is called Slap Slap Lickety Lap by Instant Funk. There it is. From the Sal Soul label, 1979. Just disco, no other way to describe it. This was just kind of Euro pop from an act called Silent Circle. It's called Love Is Just a Word. Catchy Euro pop. I liked it a lot. A lot of synthesizers. Can't remember too much else about it, but take a look at them. That gives you kind of an idea of what it's like. This one was really, really good. Slipstream. This was a double 12-inch on the Beggar's Banquet label. Well, double LP of 12-inch mixes. And it features early 80s British jazz funk from the likes of, let's see who's on here, Freeze, Incognito, Level 42, Light of the World, Multivision, Shack Attack. Those were the groups I knew. And the rest of it's all just really, really solid, strong funk from the early 1980s. And it's kind of cool. It's on Beggar's Banquet. So I really am a huge fan of Level 42 and Incognito and a lot of acid jazz. Think of this as like proto-acid jazz. You're in the right ballpark. Boomtown Rats. Never had this album. The Fine Art of Servicing. Found it for $3. I love the Boomtown Rats and never bought this. So now I own it. And it was in good shape too. Power pop from the late 1970s. I showed you the Kaleidoscope singles collection a little bit ago. Well, this is their second album called Faintly Blowing. I never had it. So I did pick up a copy of that. It's a reissue on the Sunbeam label. Faintly Blowing. Don't know how well you can see it with the glare here. It's not too bad. Enjoyed this. Family. Late 60s, early 70s. Kind of a folky psych act from England. This is called Music in a Doll's House. And I was quite fond of this. Very kind of psychedelic, trippy pop album. I've seen it shown a lot in the vinyl community, so I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. More British funk, jazz from Lynx, a duo out of the UK, singer David Grant, and their biggest hit was Intuition, and it's got kind of a Caribbean feel to it. Again, if you like early Level 42, this would be straight up your alley. Household Shocks. This is an album of post-punk that came out originally in 1980 and has been reissued by Dark Entries, and full of just some electronics, some doomy guitar, Bauhausy kind of stuff. I don't know, it's kind of a mix of everything. Very entertaining. The group I knew on here was called The Sinking Ships, and I have one of their 45s. Very doomy, guitarish, moody post-punk. Household Shocks. Check it out. Fifth Dimension, The Worst That Could Happen. This is an album also known as The Magic Garden. Fantastic orchestral pop written by Jimmy Webb, the guy who did MacArthur Park and the Glenn Campbell hits, By the Time I Get to Phoenix, Gentle on My Mind. So this is an album that he worked on with the Fifth Dimension, and it's fantastic. Biggest songs from it are The Worst That Could Happen. Paper Cup is really good. The Girls song, The Magic Garden, Carpet Man. They also take on the Beatles' Ticket to Ride. Fantastic album by the Fifth Dimension. Huge fan of them. The Blow Monkeys. Love them. This is an album I never had by them, and it's called Whoops, There Goes the Neighborhood. This came out in 1988 in the UK only. It didn't get released in the US, and so I never did get a copy of it. So, quite like it. Good British pop with a dance feel to it. Marshall Jefferson, kind of a Detroit techno. I think he's Detroit techno. He's just a producer that I like a lot. I kind of bought a few of his 12 inches over the years. This is one that he released under the name By All Means. Just good kind of dance house from the late 1980s. Big Country, Harvest Home, their first 12-inch. Never had it. Found it for $1. Picked it up. I like Big Country. They're one of those groups that I always liked them, but just never... After The Crossing, I just never bought much by them. So, kind of picking up things here and there. So, I tell you what, we are at 16 minutes. I've still got, I'm only halfway through this pile. We got a lot more to get through here. So, I'm going to go ahead and stop it for now. And then I'm going to pick back up. And if you're still with me, great. If you're not, thanks for watching. All right?